I felt like I'd gone as far as I could go in the industry. I mean, you could go to be a manager or whatever, but I just felt like I'd done enough of it. But I couldn't get over the fact that I was making so much money and I really needed to be doing something else, I thought. And then one day, I picked up the Orlando Sentinel business section, and the headline said that the average stockbroker in the United States made $165,000 the previous year. Now this was in 1985. And I looked at that article and I read it and I tore it out and I kept reading it and I go, the average stockbroker makes $165,000. I thought, like, what do the good ones make if the average one makes $165,000? So I had just come back, I had gotten a job selling timeshares in St. Andrews, Scotland, and I had come home for Christmas and I was getting ready to go back, and my friends kept saying, are you going to go back to Europe? And I said, well, I'm going to do that or I'm going to become a stockbroker. And they go, what? What are you going to be a stockbroker? Well, I didn't have any lead about how to become a stockbroker, but I knew a woman who had sold a phone system to a guy who was starting a little international stock brokerage down in Winter Park. And I went down and talked to him, and he agreed to hire me. He said, look, you got to get a Series 7 license. And this is one of the amazing, this is something you should know, incidentally, as investors. You can get a Series 7 license and start managing people's life savings faster than you can get a manicurist license in the state of Florida. You need to be careful. Someone could be a fully fledged registered representative, senior vice president, whatever, and have no experience whatsoever in managing people's money. So that's something you need to be aware of. But anyway, I passed the test and I started working for him. And of course, I actually took a step back. And this is something I think happens to a lot of people. I was not able to make as much money immediately as I had been making selling timeshares by going into the stock brokerage. But they did have one thing in common. Both were straight commission jobs. Now, when I took the timeshare job, everyone said, like, don't work a straight commission job. You know, you get nothing if you don't sell anything. Now, that seemed like a terrible thing to somebody if you're a terrible salesman, that is a terrible thing. We called it the no deals, no meals program, you know. So you had to always be selling something, but in a sense, it's invigorating because rather than all the salary jobs that ever had seen my friends work, is everybody was trying to do as little as possible. They took the longest lunch and left as early as they could because they're on a salary. They get paid the same thing. Well, when you're on a straight commission, obviously, the more deals you get, the more money you make, the better off you are. So even though I was taking a serious cut in income to leave the timeshare industry to get into stock brokerage business, it ended up being a good thing, because whereas in timeshare you had to go out and just create your livelihood day after day after day, the brokerage business is like the insurance business. You get enough clients with enough assets, and after a while it's like insurance with renewals. You've just got such a large base of clients that the money just starts to flow. So because I'd had experience selling intangibles like timeshares, it became quite easy for me to sell stocks and bonds and mutual funds and so on. I did really well at it. I actually did it for 16 years after that. But I did learn a little secret that came from the timeshare industry. I talked to different firms, and the tough thing about most sales is not the selling. If you can find someone who will sit down and listen to you, someone with an open mind, someone who's a qualified prospect, you can sell all sorts of people all sorts of things. The tough thing is to find someone who will actually sit down and listen to you. In the timeshare, they bring them into you. In the brokerage business, you're supposed to go out and join the Moose Lodge and the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary and whatever, and everywhere you go, you're asking somebody, what do you do with your IRA, blah, 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 blah. And that's a very tough way to make a living. But I found an interesting little twist, and that was the fellow that owned this brokerage firm had a brother who had a publishing company, and they put out these investment newsletters. And in these investment newsletters, they would recommend various securities, and at the end of the article, recommending that you buy XYZ, they'd say, so call International Assets, which was the company I was with, and for more information. So the people were actually calling us. People would call in, and we would take the order, tell them about the stock, take the order, and then once we had that one stock in the portfolio, we'd call them back and try to get them to flesh out the portfolio, and so we'd build it bigger and bigger and bigger. And that worked really well. I learned a lot. You get you can't believe the financial education you get being a stockbroker. And I have to say that the first thing I learned was, very few people in this world become rich because they are good enough to play in the NBA, or they're smart enough to found a software company in their garage. That doesn't happen very often. It's not going to happen probably for most people in this room. Most people get rich in a more pedestrian way, where they work as hard as they can, they maximize their income, they minimize their outgo, they live beneath their means, and they religiously save and invest the difference. That's how most people become millionaires over time. And that's how most of the clients I had became millionaires. But I wasn't becoming a millionaire that way. I had a high income. I mean, fortunately, since I was good at being a stockbroker, I immediately had a high income, and so what did I do? I went out and bought a brand new lakefront house and a brand new Jaguar XJ6 and a brand new powerboat and all the toys, and my friends would come over and they all assumed that I was rich. And that was the furthest thing from the truth, because the truth is, if you're making a lot of money and you're spending a lot of money, you're not rich. You're just living high. No one is rich because of how much they make. You're rich because of what you own, what you've accumulated, not because of what you make, or certainly not because of what you spend. And so it's funny, here I was with this big house, and I had a net worth of and a boat and the car and all this kind of stuff. I had a net worth of virtually zero. In fact, I'll never forget, I used to pay this woman to do my taxes, and every year she would say, well, do you want to make an IRA contribution? Now, this is back when the total contribution you could make was $2,000. And I would think about it, and I was, of course, I'm in my 20s, and I'm thinking, $2,000 for retirement? I mean, that's like another lifetime away. So I would always go no, you know? And then one day I read this article about this one mutual fund company that said, you can open an account with us and there's absolutely no minimum. And so I took $2,000, the $200,000 IRA contribution I could never make, and I divided it by 12, and I thought, it's $166.66 a month. And I said, well, I'm spending that on beer every month, you know, maybe I could make an IRA contribution. So I opened an account with $166 and then had them draft my bank account every month for $166. And I was surprised to find that within a few years' time that my IRA had grown to like $35,000, and then a few years later it was $100,000 and whatever. And I can't emphasize enough that once you get going, and the first thing you have to do is to pay yourself. You have to set aside, you know, at least 10% of your income every year. And if you don't, I mean, you'll be surprised. I mean, my folks are sitting here, they're in their 70s. My mom always says, you better enjoy it. You're not going to believe how fast you get here. You know, I can't believe now that I'm, you know, within less than 10 years of being eligible to withdraw money from my IRA. At the time, it seemed like it was an eternity away. But you have to do that. And yet so many people say that they can't do it. I was, because I write an investment letter and we get a lot of exposure, I was invited to be on Fox television a few months ago over in Tampa. And so I'm over there, and they're taking call-ins from the audience, and this guy's interviewing me. And at one point in the interview, he turns to me and he goes, what do you say to those people out there who say they just can't save anything? Okay. Now, he didn't know this, but I had just come back from a 2-week financial expedition to China. And while I was in China, I saw these people working in factories that were making $140 a month. And you know how much those people saved of their income? A third. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone could live on $150 a month here, or much less save a third of it. But in China, there's no social safety network, no Social Security, no one's going to take care of you, or your parents, or your grandparents. And so they found a way. And so when he asked me that question, what do you just say to those people who can't save anything? I said, you know, the problem with a lot of people is they spend money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people they don't like. And judging by the look on his face, that wasn't what he was expecting. But I really think that anybody, no matter what your circumstances, could you get by with 10% less? Of course you could. Could you somehow cut your expenditures back by 10%? Yes. And if you don't do that, if you don't save, invest, and compound your money, the likelihood is, again, unless you hit the jackpot, if you're smart enough to found your own computer company or do something completely amazing where a windfall comes your way all of a sudden, which is a rarity, more power to you if you've got some kind of skills like that. But if you don't, I mean, it sounds pedestrian, but that's what it's all about, is planning, saving, investing, and compounding. My brother years ago lent me a book by a fellow named Mark Harrelson called Wake Up the Financial Genius Inside You. And that was the whole key. Plan, save, invest, compound. Compound means let your money keep growing. You can't be investing at the same time remodeling your kitchen or buying a new car or taking a trip to the Bahamas or whatever you might be doing. You've got to put the money away, leave it there, let it grow at a decent rate. And if you don't do it, no matter how hard you work, you're still not going to have anything to show for what you're doing, because the thing is, in our wonderful capitalistic society, there's never a shortage of incredible things to buy with the money that you're making. the old saying that expenses rise to meet the income available. Well, that's certainly what I found in the brokerage business. Is no matter how much money I was making, I had colleagues of mine making